Hello and welcome back to the Follow Your Spark podcast. I am truly delighted to have Valerie Navarro Pasion here with us today. I met this incredible human when we were at a local trash cleanup that was being hosted by Latino Outdoors here in Baltimore, Maryland. Valerie is a leader of Latino Outdoors Outings in the greater Baltimore area. Through that work, she fosters a sense of belonging for all Latinx humans in outdoor exploration to elevate Latinx knowledge and perspectives in approaching conservation. She was the first child in her family to be born in the United States. And her mother immigrated from Mexico and her father immigrated from the Philippines. And her relationship with the outdoors was deeply influenced by connections with people and places during her service in the Peace Corps Paraguay. She served there as an environmental education and conservation volunteer. Now she is currently pursuing a PhD in geography and environmental systems at the University of Maryland in Baltimore County, where her research focuses on the relationships between indigeneity, gender, land rights, and global conservation. I was so inspired when we first met by all the incredible work that you're doing, Val, and I just cannot wait to dive into this conversation. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So the first question I always ask people is, when you hear that phrase, to follow your spark, what, if anything, does that make you think of?
Yeah, I love this conceptualization of a dream or a hope as a spark because I think it lends itself to the metaphor of a light that can be fragile and can be hard to see sometimes. So when I hear follow your spark, I think of like, when did I even recognize that there was a spark to follow? Or how did I determine which spark was mine or which one was like a spark that was lit by other people or by just like other forces that weren't true to like my own person, my own identity, and my own passions. So yeah, I think of how the path to follow a spark too can be pretty fraught and is paved really nicely for some folks, and for other folks involves a lot of bushwhacking, scratches, and blood, sweat, and tears. But yeah, I am very fortunate to feel like I have had the opportunity to follow many sparks.
Yeah, wow. I love so much of what you said, especially, when you talked about sometimes that spark can be fragile or it can be dim or it can be small and hard to see. And how do you notice it? And how do you know and determine what spark is coming from inside of you and what spark might be ignited from someone else? So I would love if you could answer that question that you posed of, when did you first feel a spark within you to follow?
Yeah, I think I came to it a little later, maybe in undergrad in what year was that? 2014 or 15 maybe. And this was a time where I learned that everything that I had learned up to that point was wrong or very misleading or very romanticized, and that the real world can be pretty ugly, can be. And so I think that ignited one spark of searching or, yeah, a seeking of what my role is in like an overall struggle for liberation and what my identities mean for my positionality in that struggle. Yeah, I would say that was one of the first ones. And it's maybe hard to follow in the sense that it involves being a disruptor in a lot of spaces. Sometimes it's unpleasant or uncomfortable to be around a disruptor.
Yeah. And one thing I heard is sometimes a spark isn't a clear do this or go there. Sometimes the spark is a clearing. Sometimes the spark is like it burns the forest down and what you thought you previously knew or what you were previously experiencing. And now you're just looking at space. and you don't know where that path is going to lead. There's that searching, there's that seeking, there's that question. So it's a great example of, yeah, a spark isn't always a crystal clear message of do this. It might be the not
Yeah.
this, of the veil parting or something lifting and having a new sense of clarity that leads you to your next question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
And I think it is kind of that where, yeah, like when you use something that's already lit to light another match, how it like catches really quickly, but also then that match
Mm.
might burn out really fast as well. And so it's just like a
Mhm.
series of igniting and dying out that I appreciate. And I think that what comes out, I feel like I'm like really harping on this metaphor, but it just is turning out to work really well. Once
Yeah.
something like has burnt out and become carbon, and that is useful too. And slash and burn methods for agroforestry is there for a reason because of
Mhm.
what it reinvests into the health of the soil after that.
Mhm.
So I kind of am fine with the fact that I've followed sparks that turned out to be nothing or turned out to burn out really fast. But yeah.
And it's like you said, nothing is nothing,
Mhm.
right? Like if you follow something and it doesn't lead where you expected, it might turn into compost, it might turn into soil, it might turn into fertilizer for whatever that next step
Yeah.
is on your journey. And as we're kind of talking about all of these nature metaphors and things, I would love to know, have you always been connected to nature? Or was that a spark that developed somewhere along the way?
Yeah, I had a relationship with nature. Well, I think we all do, but it was not very intentional and it was not very intimate for a long time. I
Mhm.
had enjoyed going on hikes, but I had never considered like a deeper relationship with land, encompassing like water and air and like land with a big L, until probably Peace Corps. And not, I
Mm.
don't think that it was because of Peace Corps as a federal agency that happened, but more
Mhm.
so like the
Mhm.
relationships that were formed with people that did have very close, intimate relationships with land,
Mm.
and that were
Mhm.
generous enough to share that with me, that I had kind of reevaluated like what my ideologies of nature are, what my
Mm.
ideologies of conservation are, and what westernized ideas of protecting or saving Earth means in contrast or maybe conversation with indigenous ways of knowing and
Mhm.
understanding land and conservation. So I think that is where it started. It really picked up really fast, really naturally, just from the
Mhm.
environment that I was in. And then when I came back to the States unexpectedly because of COVID, actually, I was like, how do I make sense of what I
Mm.
just experienced and learned?
Mm.
And now being like back unexpectedly in Baltimore.
Mhm.
So I think that's how, yeah, that's how that sort of got me thinking about being here and Baltimore being the place where I grew up, and how to bring what I learned back home and share it with other people that either were also born and raised here or recently moved here, but especially for people that do identify as Latina or like maybe did have really close relationships with land in their homelands and are now like immigrants in
Mm.
a strange, weird place. So that's kind of how I fell into work with Latino Outdoors.
Yeah. So I am curious, you talked about when you unexpectedly came back to
Yeah.
Baltimore, figuring out, okay, how do I integrate these new perspectives, these things that I learned? What did help you through that transition to kind of bring with you the essence of what you learned or the new perspectives that you had into your lifestyle back in Baltimore?
I really put a priority on being outside and not necessarily like for a particular mission or program or,
Mhm.
agenda other than to just be outside. And
Mhm.
I really luckily came upon an opportunity to serve as a Maryland Conservation Corps volunteer, which is an AmeriCorps program. And so that was like my avenue to like being
Mhm.
outside all day of every day. And I was like, how can I begin to encourage other people to be outside in Baltimore if I'm not even really familiar with that? So that was one of the ways I think that I coped with this just shock, basically, in many ways, of
Mm,
course, because of
mm,
the pandemic, but also it was like another culture shock, I would say.
yeah. And with your experience with that, Latino Outdoors, is there anything that you've seen, especially with people who, like you said, might not have a relationship to the city or nature here? What has helped them build that connection with place, with nature to begin to deepen their relationship?
Yeah, I think it is that they belong outside and outdoors
Mhm.
as much as anyone else, and
Mhm.
that it is beyond, both beyond and preceding outdoor industry and outdoor
Mhm.
recreation industry. And
Mhm.
so, if you don't have specific gear, or you have never been to REI, or you're not trying to do an intense 4-hour hiking trip,
Mhm.
that doesn't mean
Mhm.
that you don't belong in the outdoors, that you don't deserve to
Mhm.
enjoy nature and be
Mhm.
outside. And I think there's a great, I don't know, power or joy in just going to what is accessible to you. And that's kind of hard to do, especially if you don't have
Mhm.
a car here, because the larger parks, like the state parks, are not public transportation accessible. But going to parks like Herring Run Park or
Mhm.
Patterson Park, Lake and Good Falls, and just finding the pockets where you can easily get to and just take a moment and breathe have
Mhm.
been really effective, and maybe just as effective as like an overnight camping trip somewhere else.
Yeah. So it sounds like A, remembering that spending time outdoors doesn't have to look like an extensive overnight camping trip or whatever it is. Like you can connect to nature in a local park. You can connect even by going outside if there's a tree near you. Like any element of nature can be a bridge to that connection. And it sounds like really remembering that while sure there are still many barriers to access to nature, that it can also be more accessible than people might think sometimes.
Yeah, and it is beautiful to also have people connecting with each other about what they already know
Mm.
about their relationships with
Mm.
nature. So there's
Mm.
people that come and they're sharing stories about plant relatives that they know very well,
Mhm.
like the back of their hands, that they remember from their homelands, or that they
Mhm.
learned for the first time here, and they're like sharing that with each other. And that's one of my favorite things to see is
Mhm.
like the connection happening both between people to people and like people to
Mhm.
place. Those are part also of the frameworks of Latino Outdoors, is connecting people and to place, and also to the process of being outdoors, and like
Mhm.
ultimately, or maybe not ultimately, because I don't think it's hierarchical, but additionally connecting people to policy and what it means to
Mhm.
feel represented in environmental
Mhm.
policy.
Yeah. For people who aren't familiar with Latino Outdoors, I know I had never heard of them or experienced them before I met you. Can you speak a little bit more about what is that organization? How can people get involved in it?
Yeah, of course. Latino Outdoors is a nonprofit organization that started in 2013. And it started in California by somebody named Jose Gonzalez, and with the people in their circle as well, not alone, but mainly because of an observation that there were voices missing, there were perspectives missing in outdoor recreation and environmental education and policy. And so the model of it is that there are different chapters all throughout the states, and we're mostly volunteer run. There are staff members in California and then some spread throughout the states that do some like regional support, but mostly the mission is to connect folks that identify as Latina with the outdoors and with nature, with a focus on culture and family, which includes chosen family. And so that can happen through being outdoors and leading outdoor programs, and it can be through storytelling. There is a part of Latino Outdoors initiatives called Yo Cuento, which is a storytelling initiative that can include blogs and vlogs. And Yo Cuento in English can have two meanings. The same words can have two meanings. It can mean I count, like I matter, and it can also
Mm.
mean I tell, like I'm telling a
Mm.
story. the Yo Cuento initiative has been really powerful as well, in addition to bringing folks through supported, like financially supported programs to have what they need to feel safe and comfortable and welcome in an
Mm.
outdoor recreation activity or setting.
Wow, beautiful. And it sounds like you said this is an opportunity for people to connect with other people, people to connect with place, people to connect with nature, and to be able to share those stories. And, sometimes people might not even realize, or they might not initially think that they're connected to nature. And yet, when other people start talking about, relationships with plants or something, I can imagine somebody might remember, oh, actually, when I was young, I had this, they might not see it as a relationship, but stories might come through in the presence of other storytelling. So yeah, I'm curious if you have any experiences like that of someone kind of realizing, oh wow, I'm more connected to nature than I thought I was.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've seen a couple and they moved me to tears pretty much. And specifically, I'm thinking of a time when somebody, a young person, shared that they were very shy. I think they were maybe like 11 years old. They were very shy and they were pretty soft spoken. And then they saw a bird. And now I'm not going to remember which bird it was, which is embarrassing because I love birds, but it was a while ago. And they lit up and they were like, I remember this bird. I've
Mm,
seen this bird. I know this bird. And I was like, oh, cool. Where do you know this bird from? And it turned out this was a migratory bird whose flyway did
mm,
include this young person's home country. So it could have
mm,
been, yeah, that was the same bird species as you recognize from your home country, but it also could
mm,
literally be the same exact bird. Like,
mm,
that is not an impossibility. And so that was just like, it just sent me. I was like, that is so beautiful. And the fact that they felt immediately this connection between how nature and how us humans as part of nature, and just like how birds as part of nature have this, like the way that we span geographies and the ways that we span place in a quite diasporic way, doesn't mean that we have to be severed or fragmented in terms of connection and in terms of feeling
mhm.
at home wherever we are.
Yeah. Wow. That's powerful. And it reminds me of, I'm a feng shui consultant and I've studied biophilic design and this idea that as human beings, we're designed to thrive in nature. And now we spend 90+% of our time indoors, and the impact that can have on us of being disconnected. Like sometimes if someone's sitting in a cubicle and they don't have a window, they don't even know what the weather is outside. They don't have access to light, like all these things that are so ingrained in our DNA as beings of this planet, and how seeing a bird can just bring up so much connection and help someone remember how they're interwoven into this larger relationship with the world, with nature, with all these other beings. So, what a powerful reminder of just like a simple interaction with nature can open up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think it is part of that too, of the intimate relationship with land and like with knowing what's going on outside definitely has to do a lot with what ideas of development are. And in the States, maybe development means like a lot of technological and like infrastructural advancements. Um, it's not
Mm-hmm.
so much development of that connection to nature. Whereas when your house is like half outdoors, or like your kitchen is outdoors, there is no option but to be very attuned to what's going on with
Mm-hmm.
the air, with the wind, with anything going. Yeah, I can see how I always go like down a rabbit hole maybe the terms of developing countries or what measures of success development or measures of
Mm-hmm.
like advancement really are.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's like when sometimes I think of like development or money or what people want to create, sometimes we create these barriers to be more comfortable or protect ourselves from nature. We have heat, we have air conditioning, we have, indoor plumbing, we have all these things so that we can be protected
Mhm.
indoors versus when people live more openly with nature. Like you said, maybe your kitchen is outdoors, maybe you're just more integrated, you're more present to air quality, water quality, these different things that are around you, and have a different perspective of maybe your impact on those things or your relationship to nature. So it's interesting of the more I'm hearing, like the more integrated and immersed you are in nature, potentially, the more you might care about it, or the more you might be invested in protecting it, or have that perspective at least of wanting to honor it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think exactly what you mentioned with having heat or AC as like the term is overall climate control, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that term is like a perfect example of this assumption of like dominance. Like we need to control climate in this way that's beneficial for us. But now when the tables are turned and the climate, can you like control differently because things are going awry? We're like,
Mm.
not.
Yeah. And now this kind of brings me to, I know you have experience with Peace Corps, Latino Outdoors, Backyard Base Camp, all these different avenues of getting involved and organizing and volunteering. Can you share any biggest lessons or things that have opened up for you in volunteering and organizing that you would want listeners to know, or just be able to share a little bit more about your experience in those realms?
Hmm. Yeah. I think the biggest thing is living as close to your values as you can. And hopefully, those values include accountability to relationships, to land, and to people. And I think that at the same time, volunteering, and especially volunteering in any type of activism space or community organizing space, can burn people out really fast. And so, showing care in the way that you're living your values and not beating yourself up for if you use a straw one time, or,
Mhm.
just understanding your own obligation in relationship to those things that are like supposedly going to save the world. Doing your best with what you
Mhm.
have in front of you and being
Mhm.
proud of yourself for that is okay.
Mhm. Yeah. So I'm hearing of like the importance of having clarity around your values, what matters to you, and being able to, like you said, kind of start where you are and begin the journey wherever that is, and know that there's always going to be something more to do or something else you can do, and to also be able to acknowledge whatever you're doing and wherever you're able to start, and having care for yourself along the way in that journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for someone who is new to volunteering or organizing, and we just talked about kind of where to start of identifying your core values, start one step at a time. And is there any other insight or guidance you might have for someone who's, yeah, I really do want to start volunteering, or I would really like to contribute to the environment in some way? Advice would you give to that person kind of at the beginning of their journey in this?
Yeah. Well, I would like to talk. I would love to talk. And that there are luckily already a lot of people that are in this work, and that you don't have to come in knowing everything, and just like opening the conversation with exactly that. I just want to start somewhere, and here I am. Showing up is
Mhm.
enough. And
Mhm.
so you can learn more by, if you have a local organizing group, whether it is environmental specifically or cultural wayfinding, if you have any identity based groups in your area. In
Mhm.
Baltimore, there are a few, but I don't want to like misspeak on them. So maybe we can share that after. But I definitely do invite conversation. Like, I'm a real person that really exists. And I would love to connect. And I have
Mhm.
capacity to connect with folks and talk
Mhm.
about that. So yeah, reach
Nice.
out to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very generous. And we will definitely put all of your information in the show notes. And it's also a good reminder of, if there's something you're interested in getting involved in, to not be shy. And if there's an event, show up there. Even if you don't know anybody, even if it's your first time, you can let go of needing to have it all figured out, or thinking, you should be further along than that, or whatever it is, knowing that wherever you're starting is a perfect place to start, and to have the courage to spark conversations and talk to someone, and believe that, people are open to responding. And who knows, maybe not everyone is. And making that attempt can open up
Yeah.
conversations and sparks and a path to emerge.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I ultimately do feel like there are a lot of people that are on the same team with the same or similar dreams and similar hopes for what our world could be, but also what Baltimore can be more specifically, if that feels more like within reach. Like start with Baltimore and then we'll see.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Gotcha.
yeah, you having this podcast and you living in the area, I think is also so special and important. And so I just also want to give gratitude to you as well.
Well, thank you for saying yes and being here today. And I'm curious, you use the word cultural wayfinding. Can you define what that means for us?
Oh, sure. Wayfinding in general is just figuring out where you are and where you're going. I think maybe architects or floor plan designers use it when they're trying to direct people to where they need to go without having a person telling them. So like in airports,
Mm-hmm.
if there's like all the arrows and the signs telling you where to go, that's like wayfinding. So cultural wayfinding is like looking for the signs and looking for the letterheads, looking for the arrows, or looking for anything that can guide you in the direction of where you need to go. And sometimes it's hard and
Mm.
you don't want to go the direction that the arrow is telling you to go, but it's where you need to go to really
Hmm.
know yourself.
Hmm. Can you tell us a story about an experience of cultural wayfinding you've had in your life?
Oh gosh. Yeah. Yeah, I was born here in what is known as Baltimore, and it was a confusing time for me. I became self aware at a pretty young age, like maybe before first grade, even. And I was trying to understand why I looked different from everybody and
Mm.
why I was neither white nor black. And Baltimore being a majority black city, and then me being in spaces that were either black spaces or white spaces. And I just couldn't understand what I wasn't even sure if I was a person. My mom like tells this story that
Mm.
I asked her what we were because I couldn't understand that we were also people. We were just people that
Mhm.
looked different. And so a lot of the wayfinding for me was not shying away from those differences and not being discouraged from we're not shying away from shame of being culturally different than what was dominant in the area
Mm.
in the circles that I grew up with, whether it be like weird in quotation marks food or speaking a different language in public or anything like that, and instead being curious about that shame and getting to know it more deeply, and maybe even taking on some of my parents' stuff of how they wanted to protect us from being bullied. And so they also assimilated pretty hard. And so some of the wayfinding for me was following an arrow that looked like it was pointing me down a pretty hairy path of just getting to know what our cultural traditions are, even if
Mm.
they are like laughed at or scoffed at or misunderstood. And that has gotten a lot easier with time just because times are changing for the better, I ultimately do believe. And so, yeah, some of that wayfinding was just like being like, this is it. And it is weird sometimes and confusing most of the time. But I would much rather go down this path than one that like, is easy and clear on the surface, but is ultimately empty and like void
Mm.
of true meaning for me
Mhm.
ancestrally.
Mm. So when I hear the word wayfinding, like I said, I come from a feng shui perspective, and that word wayfinding is used in context of finding your way to your house. And is the number on your house clear? Is the walkway clear? Like helping people find their way home or helping other people find their way to a place, something like that. So when I hear the term cultural wayfinding, what comes up for me is being able to find your way within culture, find a way that's true to you.
Mm,
And I'm curious how or if you see that connecting or aligning with this energy of following your spark and following this path. Because you said, there might be signs pointing in different directions,
mm,
and ultimately ultimately for you, it was about how to find the way that's aligned with you internally, with your ancestors, with your culture, with the path that you want to be on. Hello, it's Gina here, popping in for a moment to share that if you are craving direction in your life and you want to feel at home within yourself and confident and empowered and clear about what you are creating in your life, I've got a very special opportunity for you. I'm offering a 3-month coaching container called Alchemize and Expand. It's all about looking back on 2024 and integrating all of the lessons you've learned and the blessings you experienced, and really telling an empowering story about yourself and your life so that you can move forward into the year ahead feeling confident, capable, and clear. During our 3 months together, you'll also have time to clarify a vision for what you desire and why it matters in 2025, and hone in on inspired actions you can take to move forward towards your goals. There will also be time and space built in for reflection and evaluation so that you can learn as you go. There are limited spots left for this program, so if you want to claim one of them as yours, head to ginacasbaro.com/alchemize and expand. We start this month in December, so if this speaks to you, the time is now. Go to ginacasbaro.com/alchemize and expand and join us for this magical container. All right, let's get back to the interview and hear what helps Val come home to herself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been hard, but also I think that idea that you just said, or like that conceptualization of it as coming home, is really what hits for me, because it is like coming home to yourself in your own body. And regardless of larger, maybe narratives of what your culture should be or what it has been, like you are the culture, you're making it as you go. And so I think that is something that I learned too, that I was like, am I doing my culture right? And then, yeah, learning that it's always evolving and that like we are defining it every day and redefining it every day. And so I think what I've been really fortunate to have is people that are on similar journeys and that we can lean on each other in times when we need to. And we do have inner communities, we do have people looking out for us, like pointing out where there's potholes and, you know, shining a light when it's dark. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
Yeah, it's like I realized I didn't even really ask a question. It was more of like a question of, what do you think? Does this resonate?
mhm,
And it sounds like you said, of the theme coming up of finding your way
mhm,
home. And another like central theme I'm hearing is this idea of like, you belong.
mhm,
Like when you were asking this question of, am I even a human?
mhm.
Who am I
Yeah.
in the context of this city and the, all these things? And it's this reminder that it's all evolving and unique in any given moment. And whoever you are, whatever your background, you belong wherever you are. You belong in nature, you belong in your city, you belong in your culture. You don't have to be or look or, do anything different in order to inherently belong, and trusting that you don't have to fit a particular mold
Mhm.
to be something. Like who you are is enough.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really what it is. Just feeling and
Mm,
knowing that you belong while at the same time figuring out maybe the differences between feeling and knowing that you belong, and figuring out how you show up in terms of what identities or relationship to power you have that might affect other people's sense of belonging. I don't know if I'm
mm,
explaining that in an eloquent way, but
mm,
yeah, what privileges and powers do I have that put me in a position where I do feel this great sense of belonging now? Like,
mm,
where can I serve as a supporter or as like an ally or like an
mm,
uplifter rather than somebody
mm,
that's just, well, I know that I belong, so I'm going to take up the space.
mhm, mhm.
And so figuring that out too has been a journey.
Yeah. And I'm hearing that in a lot of what you're saying, of that difference of, like you said, not just thinking, oh, I belong, so I deserve to take, I can control everything, I can control the climate, I can control nature, I can control whatever. But it's about, okay, yes, understanding your values, and also ideally in the context of relationships and reciprocity and accountability, and how can we all support each other. It's not like I belong so you don't, or like I matter more and what I need matters more than what you need. It's like, how can we all honor ourselves and honor each other at the same time?
Exactly.
I'm curious, something else that you shared with me before the podcast, of this idea of acting from a place of love versus a place of fear or hate. I'm curious if you could share more about, spaces where there might be tension, or there might be, that feeling of conflict, or something like you wanting to create a better world and there's a challenge or something. Like, what does it look like to act from that place of love versus a place of fear or hate? What does that mean to you?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. This is like one of my hardest struggles because the world can be really scary. And the problems can evoke a lot of fear. And so, but I do believe that where you start and like where your intention is does impact the outcome, even if the action is the same. And so I think I understand fear based decisions or motivations maybe as very reactive, and energetically, I think that like frantic nervousness of like just
Mm-hmm.
reacting to something terrible, like you can feel it in
Mm-hmm.
the outcome and in whatever action comes to follow. And maybe it's most salient right now because of the election, but I mean, it has been many things before that and will be many other things in
Mm-hmm.
the future. And so instead, acting from love is more like I'm not choosing to do this because I'm angry at the current state. Even though I
Mm-hmm.
am, I'm not choosing to do this because I'm angry or out of anger. I'm choosing this because I love people so much. I love land so much, and I have such a strong hope for what can be and a
Mm-hmm.
faith for what can be.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I'm going to choose to act. Like I'm going to dream of a utopia and act as if,
Mm-hmm.
going setting fire with like hatred in my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's a really powerful distinction, like you said, of the energy that we bring to something matters. And if ultimately, if any of us desire a world where there is more love, or there is more equality, there is more, beautiful things, if we're coming to that angry and screaming at each other and yelling and coming with this hate, ultimately, what energy are we adding? Are we like pouring on the fire?
Mhm.
And if we're pouring on the fire hatred and anger and all of these things, that's what expands. Even if we think, or, say we desire love, love doesn't mean passivity. We can still, actively work towards this beautiful world, and we don't have to be angry at each other as we do it. We can come and bring in love and curiosity and connection and support while we hold a vision for whatever it is that we want to create.
Yeah, exactly. And it is exactly that curiosity piece of like meeting meeting people with curiosity and like generosity even when it doesn't feel reciprocal. And that's hard.
And it's ultimately, I don't know, our choice. And I'm looking at this paper next to me and looking at the word disruptor, and I'm just like thinking, what just popped into my mind of like love disruptor. Like, if someone's coming at you with hate, it can be a disruption to not hate them back,
Yeah.
to not be angry at them back. That it's like, whoa,
Yeah.
that can be something else that like bursts a bubble and helps evaporate and dissipate that energy of hate. So yeah, that's just
Yeah.
what came to my mind when you were talking about that.
Yeah. I hope
Love disruptor.
so. Yeah. It is really special though when you don't just say the words but you can feel it. Like I have felt in my soul that
Mm,
I've loved people even when they couldn't love me back or love people like me
mhm,
back. I'm like,
mhm,
I can see how your life experiences have led you to this point where you're making these choices, and I
mhm,
still think that you have value as a person and that you deserve dignity and
Mm.
love. And that it feels a lot better than to
Yeah,
go around with the heaviness of having to hate somebody or
right.
something.
Yeah. And it's ultimately whatever energy we're carrying, that's what we're experiencing. So if we
Exactly.
have hatred for someone else, we feel hatred in our hearts.
Mm,
So why not fill yourself with love and let that be the fuel that helps you change or be in action or organize or whatever it is?
mhm. Yeah,
Beautiful.
exactly.
Well, as we near the end of this conversation, if there was one thing that you wanted people to remember most, what would that message be?
Hmm. Really, in this time, I feel like taking care of yourself and taking care of your neighbors can go a long way. And it
Mm,
feels like a small biggest thing to take away. But I
mm,
feel like now, I don't know, people are always saying now more than ever, but I think always not forgetting the people that are immediately
mm,
you and like in your neighborhoods, in your communities. And yeah, centering care and love is all we
mm.
can do.
Yeah. And like you said, it may seem small and it may not. Like that, if we're all doing that on even like a 1% increase level, that can have a pretty tremendous impact in the world. So thank you for that reminder. And the last question I love to ask, because part of for me, the idea of following your spark is this idea of sometimes following random things that spark your curiosity or interest, and you don't always know where they're going to go. They're not necessarily productive, and beautiful things can happen when we give ourselves permission to follow those little breadcrumbs. So, are there any random breadcrumbs you've been giving yourself permission to follow lately that have maybe sparked joy or curiosity or inspiration?
Yeah, I think following or yeah, the breadcrumb of trusting, like trusting the community or doing what you love and what you're passionate about as if there would be no consequence, even if it's for a really
Mm,
short time, because maybe
mm,
it's not sustainable for you to, I don't know, depending on if it brings income or not, but like doing what you love and like taking not letting that passion die out and trusting the community to take care of you, I
mm,
think is like one of the scariest things you can do. But I think I have been amazed in how community
mm,
has shown up for me, like for my family, ways I never could have expected. And so, and being able to return that energy when other people are like, I need to do this thing
mm,
for me. Can somebody support me? And
mm,
just, yeah, not to be afraid of leaning into community for support as much as you feel like you want to
mm.
give into community.
Are you open to sharing with us an example of how that's shown up for you recently?
Yeah. Well, I'll say in this instance, I was more in the supporting role, but a community member was in like a pretty intense grieving process of
Mm,
multiple things at the same time and was like not in a position where they could have income, a steady income. And instead of panicking or instead of getting a job that was really just like estranged labor, disconnected from self,
mhm,
disconnected from values, they just showed up wholly and truly in community and said,
mm,
this is what I need right now. I need to be fed and I need to be
mm,
housed. That's it.
mm,
And between our networks, we made it happen. And it maybe it doesn't sound like a very, I don't know, very crazy example, but I think those are like the basic things that everybody needs before anything else. And just
mhm,
like trusting that feeling of we can take care of each other and that we have been like other communities have been, I think is just really special. And I don't
mhm.
take it for granted, and everybody deserves it. Everybody deserves a community that they feel like they can lean on heavily.
It doesn't sound basic at all. It sounds really profound. And how I'm thinking, like, how often people don't ask for help. And we live in a society now where we've got Uber Eats and all these different, again, resources to to create ease or to create self-sufficiency when there's so much beauty and joy and power in community, and how we're getting further and further oftentimes in many ways away from asking for that help or leaning on our community for support, and what it takes to ask and what it takes to give, and knowing that again is reciprocal. And even if it might be inconvenient for someone in the moment to offer that housing or offer that food, to trust that's like a marble in the jar of like when you need support in the future, what you're building and contributing around you. And again, the power of if each of us are doing that and supporting each other, again, that's like a whole new
Yeah.
world of what we can create with that energy.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And I think I also would add to something I said earlier about like how you can come show up. Like we started pretty informally something that is unnamed, but we're temporarily calling it a community care directory of just, it started with a few friends and has been growing of people that are just sharing things that either things that they're good at doing or like physical things that they have that they're willing to share, and putting it in a place where you can be like, if you need this service or you need this support, you can call me or like you can email me and I'm here.
That's amazing. Is that something like Baltimore specific
Yeah, it
or?
really it started what maybe a couple maybe not quite 2 years ago, maybe a year or so ago, and it was a celebration of some sort. Maybe I think it was my graduation, my master's graduation, where I was like, I don't want presents, I don't want gift cards, I don't want people to feel like they have to bring a physical gift, but it would be a huge gift if they could share that with me. And so it started literally with just like our small friend group circle. And since then, we've just brought it's like a physical book. And so we've just been like bringing the book to other events and just leaving it out and seeing who puts what down. And so that's how it's been growing. And
Wow. So it's only a physical book. So
it's
it's
only
like
a physical
people.
book right now. Yeah. I mean, people have
That's
written down like their contact information, like either phones or emails, and it's only a physical book for now. And I kind of like that until I am probably going to be the one to input it into a digital format where other people can see it, everybody can see. But yeah, I think it's the start of something. I feel like it's the start of something. Of course,
Yeah.
like you and anybody that's listening are welcome to be a part of it.
And it's also a powerful reminder that each of us can create that
Mhm.
within our own
Exactly.
communities, whether it's something we start with our immediate friend circle, and whether you have a physical book or whether you have a Google Doc that's just like a list of call me when. These are my strengths, these are my gifts, this is what I'm willing to contribute in community. Call me when you need X. And to just have that resource, it's again like that additional like permission of, okay, these are people who are willing to contribute to our community in this way. Can we allow ourselves to give and receive with each other and be open to that
Yeah.
support? So how beautiful. Oh my gosh, Val. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. It was truly a pleasure. And I can't wait to get to another Latino Outdoors event. And I hope that people listening, if you're in Baltimore, you check it out, or it's across the
It
country, right?
is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So look it up. There'll be all kinds of resources in the show notes for you to get involved. So, yes, thank you again for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, really.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope this interview sparked inspiration to support you living your most authentic, empowered life. And if you're feeling stuck right now and your life isn't exactly going as you hoped, I want to offer you a special opportunity that has the power to free you up. I'm hosting a masterclass on December 19th all about how to stop self sabotaging, expand your belief in what's possible, and live a life of no regrets. In this totally free 90-minute experience, I'll share the 5 key practices that helped me stop holding myself back and have the courage to pursue dreams like starting my own business, going on a year-long solo road trip, and so much more. Whatever your dreams are, they are possible, my friend, even if they don't seem that way right now. If you're ready to stop getting in your own way and unleash your fullest potential, head to ginacasbarra.com/no regrets to sign up. I believe that when each of us are following that spark of purpose, passion, curiosity, and inspiration, that's when we have the most positive impact on ourselves, our friends, our community, and this planet. That's the kind of world I want to live in, and I'm here to support you any way I can. If it calls to you, head to ginakasbar.com/no regrets, and we'll see you there. Cheers to following your spark.